All right, this is the Fact Check This podcast episode number 12. Today I am joined by Giles Miller. He's one of the peddling fiction fans from the private Facebook group and continuing my little series that I'm going to do of Meet the Peddlers. So, Giles, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? How'd you come around to libertarianism? How'd you find Peddling Fiction podcast? And anything else you think is pertinent?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me on. I've never done anything like this before, so it's pretty cool. Yeah, so how I got into libertarianism, I suppose is kind of a long story, or not maybe. I haven't really thought about it too much. I was working at a car dealership, and I met a friend of mine who I actually rent a room out to now. And we are both really into like deathcore metal. And I think in one of our sales meetings, because we were selling cars, they were talking about things that you like and things that would be important to you in a car. And I was like, oh, I'd want something with a good system because this is what I listen to. And so later he came up to me and was like, oh, you're into this thing. And we started talking, and then something at work was happening, and I was like, what's your opinion on this? Like, you're not like a liberal lefty, are you? And he was like, and he kind of smiled at me. He was like, I'm an anarchist. And I had never really considered any sort of anarchist philosophy, or thought about it or anything. I didn't know anything about it. So I obviously I thought it was just kind of silly, but he wasn't for any of the things that I felt against. So we were able to continue our little friendship, and I just added it to one of the funny, quirky things I knew about a coworker when I would talk about him with my family. And then we decided to go on a 17-mile hike a couple days after that. I probably don't look like it now because I had a back injury like what feels like a year ago. But I used to be pretty active, run 200-300 miles a month. So 17-mile hike wasn't that big a deal at the time, and being spontaneous about it wasn't a big deal. And he, I found out through our friendship, was an ex-Marine in the infantry and did 2 combat deployments. So he was obviously not opposed to hiking through the woods. Anyway, during this super long hike that we had, obviously there was not much else to do but talk and try to catch our breath because it was quite the hike. And I started warming up to a lot of the ideas. My opinion on politics before that was that I wasn't a big fan of it. I grew up in a military family, but at the same time, my dad always taught me, how do you know a politician is lying? Because their mouth is moving. Those jokes. So I always had this like distrust in government, and that everybody was lying. Whatever they said was important probably wasn't, and they were probably profiting off of it. And getting everybody to clamor around panic. So I think I had a lot of the baseline sort of covered. And then so later when he was like, yeah, man, you could basically do everything via consent. And not only could you do it that way, but it's actually the best way to do things and the most profitable way. So if you're trying to increase quality of life, or stuff people have or whatever, that's the way to do it. And I just felt like, yeah, that makes total sense. Who would have thought that consent was the way? And I never really considered how anti-consent not only all these liberal lefties are, but also how anti-consent most conservatives are. I'm from Portland, and so being a conservative kind of person in Portland wasn't really very popular. So I always felt like I was a part of that team because I wasn't a part of the lefty team that everybody I knew was a part of, being from Portland. And then so later, and I knew about like all the funny jokes about how Portland cops are trigger happy and they'll dump like 90 bullets into somebody. And I'm not even making that number up. That was something that happened when I was a kid.
Oh, wow.
These cops just bullet dumped this guy. And so like thinking about, because he was talking to me like, that's not a good thing. You understand that, right? And I was like, oh my God, I never really considered whether or not it was a good or bad thing. You're absolutely right. That's a terrible thing. And then he was like, here's another case and another case and another case. And then I started to find out about the, the cops shooting up all the dogs. And I was like, oh, Jesus, I didn't know this was such a thing. Through these conversations that we had, and selling cars is mostly standing around waiting for people to show up. So you have nothing to do but talk through ideas and stuff. I feel like I warmed up to the idea of it pretty quickly. And then so he showed me some people to listen to, like Tom Woods, and then I think Ben Shapiro had said something stupid, and so Dave Smith had some comments to make about it, and he was showing me a video of Dave Smith, and then so I started watching him, and then he had brought up the Peddling Fiction podcast, and I was like, oh, well, I'm new to this whole thing. Let me just try to take in as much content as I can, and so I started listening to that, and I feel like I'm a pretty good fan because a lot of the things make sense. I think I'm probably on the train that he might talk about his personal life a little bit more than I would appreciate. But that being said, it's not my show. And, if that's what he wants to do and his content is good enough to get me to listen anyway, then maybe I should just, shut up.
Hiding out in
good answer.
Hiding out in Mexico for the last 6 months or so, I think he's at least got something semi-interesting. I mean, me sitting in my basement in Indiana, I don't really feel like I have a whole lot to talk about as far as my personal life goes. But he's got a little bit more interesting of a personal life than what I do. So I kind of enjoy it.
He hates plane rides. I feel like that's the thing that stuck out to me the most.
Well, and talking about your buddy that kind of introduced you to the whole thing, I do find it interesting how many people who really lean hard libertarian, and especially in the anarcho-capitalist mindset, come from the military. Like, there are a lot of ex-military, and which one of the arguments that you get, especially from conservatives a lot of time, is that we want to shrink the military or do away with the military. It's like, look at veterans, look at people who were in the military. They want to shrink it and do away with it. Like, they see that this is a bad thing. The only ones who are, so war hawkish are the ones who are established and make a career of it. And everybody else sees that, we are wasting billions of dollars and lives fighting these wars all around the world, and destroying the lives of the ones who do come home. So I always find that really interesting, how many libertarians are ex-military.
Yeah. And he did 2 combat deployments. He was in the infantry. And he, I think they're both in Yemen, or one was in Yemen. And so, yeah, that was another thing I never really thought about. It's funny how it's not just with the military. Basically, anybody that has strong opinions about economics probably doesn't know anything about economics, especially, if you listen to the news, all the stuff that these people talk about, they've obviously not thought any of it through. But and I come from a military family. So I grew up in Washington on Fort Lewis, and my dad was in the infantry, and my mom was a generator mechanic, engineer. And so the ugly side of war is something that I was always familiar with. My dad was, it was important to him for me to know how brutal war can be, and that you got to know what you're going for. And he died before I was able to talk to him about a lot of this new ideological stuff that I've been kind of fumbling around with. But I actually think that if he were still alive, maybe a 2-hour talk and I could have him totally bought in. Which is funny because you think, like, for a military guy, certainly somebody in the infantry, even somebody that's from an older generation like my dad, like, it would be more difficult. And it doesn't seem like that's actually the case. I think a lot of the boot-looking military experience that a lot of us libertarians see is very small. Most people in the military, I think, are thinking about when they're getting out. It's written on their ID, so they're looking at that all the time. Every time they have to put that card in somewhere, they're reminded of another day until it's all over, because this whole thing is just such a shit show. And the more I'm exposed to this, the more I'm like, it's insane that this isn't being talked about. Like from a, not a pro-military point of view, but I suppose, kind of a pro-military point of view, 22 veterans a day kill themselves. I don't know if you've heard that before, but that's insane. Like a day, like yesterday and today,
Right.
through suicide,
And
which
that
is like,
stuff just completely gets swept under the rug. And like everybody knows that the VA is terrible, and yet like it doesn't get nearly enough attention. And then they push for government-run healthcare. Like, but
yeah, well, uh, I have some pretty strong opinions on the VA, and I'm in a weird position because I didn't join the military, although I tried. I have flat feet and a bunch of tattoos, so they were like, no way, which I'm now obviously I'm thankful for. But my dad was in the military and my mom was, and they're older now, and my mom's still alive, but my dad died, and he died of cancer. So I got to see and my dad had a bunch of injuries from being in the military. So he had back issues, he broke his knee while he was in the military. And I got to see how they take care of him. How does the VA treat our veterans firsthand with somebody that's important to me? And it's terrible. It's terrible. It's so political. We had a guy come in. My dad had like arthritis in his back, degenerative disc disease, bunch of shit. He broke his kneecap in half on like a road march that he was on. So he had a bunch of physical problems that caused him a lot of pain. And he had moved from my uncle's place at Fort Bragg and come back to Oregon, where I was at the time. And the doctor there was looking at his chart to re-prescribe him medicine and was like, man, they're not giving you enough painkillers so that you can feel the energy to move around and get some exercise and blah, 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 blah. We need to get you on to these morphine patches, and we're going to get you all better. And then he goes to do whatever the fuck doctors do, and excuse me for swearing, and comes back and was like, I feel passionately that that moving towards meditation is going to help us on our road to recovery. And my dad was like, because I remember while the guy was gone, my dad was like, man, finally somebody's going to be helping me out, and I'm looking forward to feeling better because I'm in all this pain every single day. And it's somebody that recently had a back injury, like it, I can definitely see, and his was worse than mine is. I can see how that would, if somebody was to show you some sort of shining hope, how you would really want some of that. And my dad was like, what do you mean you passionately feel about meditation? That's not what we just talked about. And he was like, yeah, I was really, while I was gone, I was really thinking about it. And my dad was a very smart guy. And he was like, no. What you did is you went and talked to somebody. You got authorization, and your boss or somebody said, no. They told you, no, you can't do this, that you got to come and give me the bad news and sell me on this meditation shit. And that's what I'm to get. And the guy was all flustered, and you could tell that my dad hit it right on the nose. That's exactly what happened. And it didn't matter. We still left empty-handed. And then when my dad got cancer, and my dad was diagnosed with cancer and died in 4 months, so it was a pretty fast process. He had a very lethal form of thyroid cancer. I got to see how they treated him then, especially with pain medicine. The cancer metastasized into his bones, and they knew that it was lethal. So there was no like, oh, we shouldn't give you opiates because you're going to get addicted, and there's a lot of problems with addiction. Like, he's on the path to death with this terminal anaplastic thyroid cancer is what it's called. And they were still incredibly stingy with it. It was insane. And I got to watch him be in all this pain, and we didn't know that he was having he ended up dying with like 8 broken bones. We didn't know that his bones were breaking. And and then of course, once it was like the last 20 days or so of his life, then they were like, oh, okay, now we'll give you all the Dilaudid and all these, super high potent things, but we had to get everything approved first. And then my mom, her Humvee, while she was in, I think, Iraq, got hit with an IED, so her back is all messed up, and she's had a lot of similar issues with the VA. So that, yeah, the idea that that we're helping our veterans and it is a joke, and they're killing themselves in crazy high numbers. I don't know if there's another American demographic that kills themselves at a higher rate than veterans do.
I don't think there is, honestly. I've looked
Yeah,
at stuff with
it, it,
different
it's
COVID numbers and death rates and stuff. I've probably spent yeah, weird amount of time looking at different death rates and stuff. And yeah, I mean, you were absolutely right. Like suicide rates, especially amongst ex-military, is just, it's insane, and it gets no coverage.
none, not even from the people that you think are supporters. You know what I mean? Like I see maybe once a month, maybe once every couple months, some like, repost thing on Twitter or Facebook about the war within, which is the 22 a day veterans killing themselves thing. And I appreciate it, I suppose, when I see it, because I don't want to see anybody dead, let alone people that are, even if I don't agree with their motivations, most of the people that join are trying to do something with their lives, whether that's free college or duty to the country or whatever. So the idea that they're all, dying in these wars, and if they survive, they're coming back and killing themselves, is, I think, a big tragedy. But yeah, not even a bunch of super conservatives are talking about it. Like, I never hear it. And listening to the podcasts and a few other podcasts and watching the news, like, I feel like I'm pretty well in the circle where I should be hearing about it, and I don't. And I think it's just such a tragedy. But anyway, yeah, yeah, that's why so many veterans are against all this shit, because they see what's happening to all the people that they serve with and what's happening to themselves. And so, people like my buddy being against going to Yemen and all that shit, like, totally makes sense to me. And,
Absolutely. I've said it a few times, but that was really what pushed me towards libertarianism, was seeing how war was handled. And the more that I researched and looked at that kind of stuff, and realized that, like, the whole thing is just this giant unending cycle of starting new wars, upending, people who are in power to create all this chaos, and then keep us in these different parts of the world to make peace while we're doing absolutely nothing of the sort, and installing democracy that then immediately fails and turns into a new power struggle. And, like, all we're doing is just pumping out more and more billions upon billions of dollars into this military industrial complex that never accomplishes anything. And it was George W. Bush's push for Iraq, for the war in Iraq, that really pushed me away from the Republican Party, because, like, why in the world are we doing this again? And it's just the whole war machine thing. I don't understand how people who claim to support the military can still back the Republican Party with the way that they have treated the military over the years and used the military for personal gain. And then the Democrats have become every bit as bad, for supposed to be the anti-war party that they were, 10, 20 years ago. Now they've completely flipped, and they're as big a war hawks as the Republicans ever were. So, like, if anybody is in any way anti-war, there's no way they can be pro-Democrat or pro-Republican. Like, you've got to be on the side of libertarianism, and I don't understand how people don't see that more clearly.
Yeah. So the long conversations I have with my buddy that now lives in my basement. I have a split level, so it's just the bottom floor. We talk about stuff like that all the time. How are they able to convince these people? How is Joe Biden able to work on the 94 crime bill, and Kamala Harris able to put all these black people away for all these nonviolent drug offenses, that and then get them all to vote for him? It seems like, I don't even know how it's possible. Like, if somebody, if I worked in an office and somebody put on my desk, hey, we have this project for you to do, I honestly wouldn't even know where to start to get people to just keep going along with it. It sounds insane. It's a kind of concept that if you were to explain it to somebody, that didn't see what was happening in our country, they wouldn't believe it was possible, because it's so ridiculous. So.
Well, and that does kind of bring me around to something that you had mentioned, and I wanted to talk about a little bit as we do this. but part of how they get that level of buy-in is, especially with the duopoly, like it really has become a religion of the state for as much as supposed to be separation of church and state. The
Yeah,
state itself has become the religion, and leftism and conservatism are the two warring faction. Instead of like the Middle East in forever in the Renaissance or the Crusades era, with the Christians and Muslims fighting against each other. Now it's the left and the right, and the Holy Land is the United States, and you've picked your side, and they are waging war, and it's insane because that is really what it is that it's a religious belief and a religious commitment to your side, no matter what they seem to do. And I wanted to
yeah,
use that to segue, because you did talk about you had in your one of your messages to me, you said you had done some religious study. So I wanted to talk to you about that a little bit, and then I'll kind of have you listen to the most recent Free Man Beyond the Wall with Pete Quinones, where he and
right.
he and Vin Armani talk about the dim age, and then they end up getting into talking about meditation and religious ideas and stuff. It's an excellent episode. I was actually laying under a tree in the woods deer hunting on Tuesday and listened to the whole thing, and it was, I don't know if maybe it was because I was laying under a tree out in the middle of the woods with nothing going on around me, but it really kind of struck me, and it was a very interesting conversation on religion. So I wanted to kind of delve into that with you a little bit, since you have some
Sure.
background on that.
Sure. Yeah. Well, as far as religion, I'll probably be the most. I'll probably have the most unique perspective that you'll ever hear, and I know that is that's a big say. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to push myself into a corner to get flamed on the internet, certainly. But yeah. My dad, my parents divorced when I was pretty young, so I grew up with my dad. So a lot of the instruction and stuff I got from him. And unlike most parents, even myself as a parent, my dad's hobby was to hang out with his kids and talk about stuff that kids don't talk about, which is kind of funny. But I had the books of the Bible memorized when I was 5. And I don't know, 50 to 100 verses memorized probably before I was like 7. And so my dad was very into, you got to know this stuff. And what was really funny was we didn't go to church at all. We had, maybe some like at home Bible study sessions, but my dad was not a fan of church, and not just like a particular church. And he had some problems with some particular churches like the Catholic Church and whatnot. Basically all of church, all of it, he had a problem with. And it was because, well, I mean, for a lot of reasons. I suppose the hypocrisy could be was maybe the most obvious one and the easiest one to explain, because so many people, even that people that aren't into religion or the church, understand what I mean when I say that, this is a group of a bunch of hypocrites. And I could talk forever about all the different religious connections between what's going on now and what's always been going on. And I can, at the same time, I can do it from a religious point of view, or a churchy sort of point of view, and from one that maybe has atheistic leanings. What is the human reason behind all of this stuff? I personally subscribe to the to the belief in God and Jesus and all that stuff. While at the same time myself, I hate all of church, all of it. And I know that sounds like you can't mean all of it, but I do mean all of it. And particularly, one, because they don't care about the source material. A lot of the things that are said in the Bible, much like the Constitution, are not the things that the church practices or the state practices. They do things that are outside of it all the time, which is one of the the big similarities, I suppose, to me. But I think people, I feel like I'm just going on a bunch of different tangents, but I think people are led to it because people want to be led. And so the reason that the church is the state has employed so many things that the church does is because of how effective it is. And I don't know, I don't know how they get away with it. An easy one, without getting into the subject too much, is the Catholic idea of indulgences, right? Which is where you need to. So they obviously believe in heaven and hell, which I don't believe in hell, and I suppose we can get into that. But they also believe in purgatory, which isn't in the Bible anywhere, and they believe that you can pay to get your a loved one's sentence reduced. So when you die, you go to purgatory for hundreds of years, thousands of years, depending on whatever. And so if you have a child or a mother or a father or a friend that's in purgatory, you can pay money, real money, to get their sentence reduced, because the church has all these Hail Marys and Our Fathers that they do. So when you pay, you are buying a bunch of these Our Father prayers and Hail Mary prayers, which is going to reduce their time, which is obviously a big money-making scheme. And that's why if you look at basically any Catholic church, they're all beautiful, because they have the money to pay for the architecture and the building. And people are hoodwinked, and they give all their money away blindly. And not just that, I'd say I'd say it's more accurate to say that their money's stolen from them, much the way taxation is. And Martin Luther, if you don't know who that Luther King Jr. were named after, he exposed the church and nailed the 99 Theses on the main door of the church in Wittenberg, Germany, to expose the hypocrisy of the church to the people. And then, of course, the church sought to kill him for his trouble.
Sounds kind of like what the state did with Julian Assange and Edward Snowden.
It's exactly. There's so many consistencies, right? Nobody wants to be exposed because, yeah, he was telling everybody, like, you got to stop giving the church all your money. If you're going to give money, it's got to be for, maybe some of these other reasons, but this reason in particular, the main way the church is getting their money is scaring people, right? My moms, we have the same dad, and his family's from Ecuador. And his grandmother, who was born and raised, she lives here now, but she was born and raised, basically her entire life in Ecuador. Her son died in a motorcycle accident, and she still goes and prays all the time and pays money to get him out of purgatory. So the idea that that's still happening, even though it was sort of debunked, Martin Luther lived 500 years ago, and then they're still getting away with it is to me the same sort of insanity as the Black community voting Democrat, and how they've been so hoodwinked. And not only that, but they're voting for the people that wrote the bills and the legislation, and then the people that enforced it, which oh my, it's just so whack. And I feel, and that not only all the state stuff, but the church stuff is one of the reasons that I'm just so vehemently against all church. Not just the Catholics, and I think that they're pretty evil. If you think about just all the molesting stuff, I mean, that's pretty bad. But their list of
and another parallel to government.
Another parallel to government, right? Of course. And which makes me feel like a conspiracy theorist, really, because it's like, man, is this really all happening? Well, yeah, it's really happening. And that can only mean, it has certain implications, and I feel like I'm losing my mind considering the implications of like a Jeffrey Epstein sort of thing. And so, my personal beliefs is that there's probably some sort of spiritual component, and that's what makes things so consistent, yet across such a wide amount of time and so many different cultures, and of course across an ocean. Why are there so many similarities? That I think there's a spiritual component. The human component, I think, is that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And so when you give people the ability to have access to all this stuff with no repercussions, psychology sort of points that that's a recipe for disaster, and I think that that's exactly what we're experiencing.
Well, and especially the no repercussions part. Like, I feel like that's the biggest part that we see with both the upper level of the church, like you were talking about, and also with the upper levels of the government, that like both of them have reached such a high perch on that power structure that there is no accountability. They can do. We're seeing it with our governors right now, like Gavin Newsom. He broke his own orders in California, and then he issued an apology. Like that makes it so much better that you came out after the fact, after you got caught and called out for it. You came out and apologized. Like it's such a hypocritical bullshit thing that they do at every level, and there's no accountability is the biggest problem. Like if any of them had any inkling that they might be held accountable and might be punished in any significant way, it would totally change the tide of all of this. But they know that there's no way that's going to happen.
Right. Which for me is just so gross, because it reminds me of just all these lessons that I was taught as a kid. Seeing them play out in like real life, and then feeling like, do other people not know this? I can't be the smartest person in the room, and I can't be. I don't think I am. So that's one. But two, there's no way that I can be. This lesson that I was taught a long time ago, and I think I even saw it in like a Breaking Bad episode or something, was there's this store owner that has this employee. This is the lesson, right? The store owner has this employee, and it's the best employee. They're always on time. They always do their job. They've helped the business make a bunch of money, right? But the owner catches this employee stealing $5. What should he do? And of course, the correct answer is, what should he do is to fire her. That's the right answer. And then here's the lesson: is why? Well, the answer to why is because that wasn't her first time, or their first time. This employee, I think in the story it was a woman, but it doesn't matter. It was their first time getting caught,
right?
Not their first time committing the action, which is why he had to get rid of her. And if they were going to do it, if it wasn't her first time getting caught, and she was going to do it, she did it the one time, she'll do it again, and so you have to get rid of her. And that's the thing with Gavin Newsom. This isn't that's just the first time he got caught. You know what I mean? Which to me is just so like the restrictions that they're putting down are so crazy, and it honestly feels like people are being groomed to something worse. And I think there's a lot of what that could be.
Well, and like you said, like with no accountability, like with the employee, if you don't fire her, it's not the first time he's done it. It's the first time he's been caught, and he's not getting punished in any significant way. So it's not going to be the last. It's not going to be the last time he does it. He's just going to be more careful and not get caught again. Or if he does get caught again, he doesn't even care, because it's already been proven there are absolutely no repercussions for it if he does. Like nobody in government, if they do something terrible and they get caught, they don't lose their job. They don't lose their, they don't get demonetized or anything like that. They just move into a different job somewhere else, and they might, disappear from the limelight for a little while, and 5 years from now they'll resurface all over again like nothing ever happened. It's just it's a farce.
Yeah, it's a farce. I tried to look it up. There's this quote that I'm sure people are familiar with. There's this guy, H.L. Mencken, if anybody's ever heard of him. I found it. So this is the quote: "It is hard to believe that a man is telling the truth when you know that if you would lie, if you were in his place." And so, which I think is so true. So in terms of Gavin Newsom's thing, when he says he's sorry or that he won't do it again or whatever, that if you had no accountability and you had all the power to do whatever you want, and basically whatever you said had the power to control millions of people, why would you stop?
Yeah, they have no incentive to stop.
They have no incentive to stop. Right, and other than maybe a crisis of character, him just feeling, oh man, what have I done? I need to start doing things differently. If he actually felt that way, so many other horrible things that happen in government, at least in his, for just California, he would expose. If he actually, felt contrition and that things were wrong or whatever, he would expose so much. But the idea that he doesn't expose all this stuff that's happening just goes to show you what an empty what an empty apology he's made.
So on that topic, talking about the exposing stuff, how do you feel about Trump and the kind of the theories that he has kind of pulled the curtain back and red pilled a lot of people and sort of exposed the system for what it is over the last 4 years?
You know, I don't think that Trump's playing 4D chess.
I totally agree. I don't think he thinks that far ahead.
I think that he's fumble fucked his way through his presidency, and you know, I'm not a big Trump supporter, not even really a big Trump fan, other than some of the things that he's said that are I just find funny. I don't know if I'd consider myself an internet troll by any means. I don't spend enough time on the computer, but I think it's funny. So whenever they say that some things are true, you know, like in the debates with Hillary Clinton when he was like, "'Cause you'd be in jail," you know, like I knew he didn't mean that, but it was just so funny to say. And I think that a lot of the supposed red pilling that he's been doing in the country has been, I think it has been happening, but I think it's been largely accidental or what have you.
It's because he has no filter and just no decorum whatsoever. So a lot of the stuff that he
Right.
pops, a lot of the stuff he pops the top off of, it's not necessarily intentional. It's just he may not have thought
Right.
it out far enough to realize what he was saying.
Yeah, he's just talking off the cuff. I think that what's funny is a lot of conservatives will say that Trump's best stuff is when he reads from the teleprompter, which I just so completely disagree with. When he is just off the cuff and just talking, that's when he says the best stuff. And I think that that's the reason that he was elected. I don't think it's because he followed a teleprompter that people started to listen to what he said. It was when he just started calling people out. You know, your husband's a rapist.
Absolutely.
You know, like everybody was like, man, that's insane, finally. And in terms of, you know, red pilling, I think some people heard stuff like that and they were like, what does he mean? I haven't been told any of this. Let me look it up and see what he's talking about. And then they find out, oh man, there's some really ugly skeletons, you know, in the state's closet. And you know, hopefully people continue down that path and get towards libertarianism. Unfortunately, I think most people stop off at being a Republican, but that just means that, you know, we have to do our job to help people see the light.
Yeah, I agree, and that's kind of one of the things that I hope for too out of all of this is maybe it hasn't necessarily red pilled people to the point that they are full on anarchist mentality, but at least even if it's completely unintentional, just random, you know, stuff that he says off the cuff, that it at least opens people up a little bit to be like, well, maybe there's some truth to some of this. Like maybe we should look more into this. And like you said, I don't have an expectation that it's going to be a lot because people tend to be a bit sheepish. Just I think that's the nature of collective groups of people is to need someone to lead them, and then you've got all of the outliers like the libertarians and the ANCAPs that we don't have any interest in that kind of stuff. And so I hope that maybe some of the people who lean in our direction, this has maybe gotten them some encouragement to push a little further out of that comfort zone and start looking to not be followers so much.
Yeah. Well, I mean, try as we might, we'll likely be unsuccessful, but I think that we'll only be unsuccessful if we, depending on the parameters of how we consider success. You know, so I have 2 children. I have 2 girls, 6 and 1, and so I'm just doing everything I can to get them to, you know, see things kind of at an early age, sort of the way my dad did it, hopefully without all the, you know, negative things that my dad did as this giant infantry, you know, person just like telling me what was going on. I'll try to be a little bit smoother about it. But, you know, some of the things that I'm doing in my life is, since I've been home a whole bunch, you know, I'm going to school to be a CPA and get my degree in accounting so that I can help the people that I want to work with and the people that I care about avoid paying taxes, keep some of their money, and which I think, you know, right now money is is the currency and how we increase quality of life. So the more money I'm able to help somebody keep, the higher that I'm increasing their quality of life. So that's in terms of like how I measure success. Me being able to do that means more to me than trying to convince the entire nation that democracy is evil and mob rule and tyranny of the majority and all those things that we all know to be true. And just make a difference in one other person's life. I hate to bring my dad up so much. It makes me sound like somebody with some terrible daddy issues. But one thing that he told me at a young age and repeated throughout my life was, one man's life is worth your time. And I always try to take that to heart. And so whenever I've been going, whenever I'm doing schoolwork or whatever, and it's difficult while my children are running in here trying to distract me, I just try to remind myself, like, this is going to matter to someone. I'm going to put myself in a position to help somebody, and that sort of gives me the motivation to keep going. So I think for the libertarian community, the biggest suggestion that I could make was to just form how you measure your own success. And I think that can be measured in improving your own life or improving somebody else's, and then go after that. You know what I mean?
I think that is something that, as I've gotten really involved with the Libertarian Party here in 2020, like, I always considered myself a libertarian since Ron Paul in 2008, and even had started leaning that way prior to that. But that really, the too big to fail bailouts and then Ron Paul's presidential run really pushed me to libertarianism. But like, I just now this year started really getting active and involved with the party itself, nationally and on the state level, and then here locally. And that is something that I've heard a lot here this year, is like making the push to engage in local communities and deal with people on a personal level. And like, as cool as it would be to have a great libertarian candidate running for president and get 5 or 10% of the vote or whatever, where we're really going to make the true change is, like you said, working with that one person to help them keep more of their money and not have to give it over in taxes, and like making direct impacts in our local communities and with other people and with our kids. I've said it a few times when we've had our group chats on the peddling fiction group. I said I have my kids listen to Part of the Problem and peddling fiction and the Lions of Liberty guys. Like, we listen to libertarian podcasts when we sit around the table and have breakfast in the morning. Like, they're 12, 10, and 9, and they are getting the full libertarian spectrum of podcasts every day. So trying to get them coached in the right direction going forward.
Right. And oddly enough, I think that is honestly the real way to affect change. They say I don't know who said it, but politics is downstream of culture. So all we got to do if we want to see a political change is to help with a cultural change, either in how we interact with people, or what we teach our children, or what we do for our community. So if somebody wants to see their local town reject all of these tyrannical restrictions, then you have to sort of be a part of the solution, as far as getting people to see how consent is a good thing, which sounds weird to try to sounds weird to tell people this is important, this consent thing, but the more people kind of have that right in front of them with real people in their lives, like in their community, the more you'll see real change. And if you talk to one person, likely they're going to talk to one person, probably more than one, and then they're going to talk to more people, and that's really how you get those ideas to spread.
And with the consent thing, I think everybody instinctively knows that consent is a good thing, and consent is something that we should be striving towards. But what they don't understand, or they just don't consciously realize, is how much of the government is built not on consent, but on force and on coercion through violence, really, through the threat of locking you up or taking you to jail or fining you or whatever. And so
killing you. That's the thing. Because if you reject to be kidnapped or arrested, then they're going to use deadly force. And so whenever I talk about things like this, I immediately go to the most shocking thing, because that's how you get people to pay attention. You know what I mean? And then of course, after you shock them and you get their attention, that's when you say, and this is what I mean. I mean, they're gonna fine you. You don't pay the fine. They're gonna show up and try to get you to go to court. You're gonna refuse. They're gonna go to arrest you, and you refuse, and then they'll use deadly force. If they'll shoot you, and if you survive, then you'll go to jail then. And if you don't, well, then there you are. We have to stop mincing words. You know what I mean?
Yeah. We've got to be honest with people, because the mainstream media, even the ones the few that are left that do lean to the right, like all of them sugarcoat it, and they don't give you. They may be honest, but they're not being truthful, if that makes sense. And you always get a version of that honest reporting that skews one way or the other and just covers up what's actually going on. And so people don't understand what the real threat is, and the real threat is our government and the way that they handle basically ruling over us at this point.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I was taught was sincerity is no guarantee for truth. So even if people really mean it, not only are they being honest, but they're being sincere. It doesn't mean that that's the truth, or that's the right course of action, or the right anything. And a lot of people don't recognize that. They see the passion of Kamala Harris, which is to me obviously it looks like she's an actress, like up on a theater.
And not even a very good one.
Not even a very good one, yeah, because she wears her emotions on her sleeve. I haven't watched a whole lot of what she's got going on, just because I just feel like it's repetitive and boring. But I watched the debate that she had, or at least part of it, with Michael Pence, and every time he said something, she wore her thoughts on her face, and I think it was so obvious that her intentions are not very good.
Definitely. Well, is there anything else you wanted to talk about?
It's up to you, man.
I feel like we've put together a pretty good episode. I think we've had some pretty good conversation.
Yeah, we can't blow all our content on one.
That's right.
Yeah, I'm good, man.
All right. Well, thanks for joining me. Again, this was Giles Miller, and I'll be releasing this tomorrow. So if anybody has anything that they want to talk about, hit me up in the Peddling Fiction Podcast group. If you're not in that group and you happen to listen to my podcast, I'm not sure why you wouldn't already be in the Peddling Fiction Podcast group, but to get in there and get in on some of the conversations that we're having and some of the fun we're having in there. And in the meantime, I will catch y'all later. Thank you, guys.
Hey, thank you, man.
See ya.
See ya.